with the first pick.
Lawrence in a foot race. Will they catch him? Touchdown, Tigers!
The Jacksonville Jaguars select
Lawrence, back left corner of the end zone for Amari Rodgers, and they do it again. Another Clemson touchdown.
Welcome into this week's edition of TrevorCast. Certainly appreciate it, Hayes Carline, along with Matt Hayes and Graham Marsh, as we are now into, the fourth episode of TrevorCast. And we've talked to an opposing coach, we've talked to a teammate, we've talked to an NFL offensive coordinator and Charlie Weiss about Trevor Lawrence. Now we wanted to get a front office perspective. So today we're going to be joined by Randy Mueller, the 2000 NFL Executive of the Year. Randy was a general manager for New Orleans and Miami, also worked with the Chargers and Seahawks. So he's going to really provide us with a front office scouting perspective on Trevor Lawrence, and we're certainly looking forward to that. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well, Hayes. I think the most revealing part about this was that Randy did what you would expect out of a front office guy. A lot of caveats. A lot of, he's got this, but you never know, which is always one of those, you look at the history of the quarterbacks in the draft, it's a 50-50, possibility typically, whether you hit or miss. And I think Randy still has that GM mentality in his head where he's thinking, he's got everything you like in a quarterback, but, there are things he could improve on, but don't forget this could happen or that could happen. I think it's a very revealing interview because so far what we've had are just coaches and a player who have just said it's ridiculous how good this kid is. Darian Rencher said when Trevor Lawrence is on the field, you feel at peace. And I think you hear things like that, and it's kind of good to hear something from a front office perspective where they pull back a little bit. They pull back a little bit, and they kind of give you a little reality of what could be. Yeah,
absolutely, and we're very lucky. This TrevorCast is sponsored by our good friends at Claude Nolan Cadillac. If you're looking for a vehicle, head over there and talk to them. Great people at Claude Nolan Cadillac. We certainly appreciate them sponsoring the TrevorCast. Yeah, it was. It was. I enjoyed it because Randy is, like you're saying, he's not going to be open to hyperbole. That's poison in NFL front offices. I mean, they and so I like the fact that, he talks about things that Trevor needs to work on, but I also found it interesting because you'll find himself he still says things that if you just laid it out in like print, if you were interviewing and then wrote a story, right, you'd have some quotes that get you pretty fired up about Trevor Lawrence being the Jaguars quarterback. But you can tell in how he's talking in his tone that he's not doing the cartwheels necessarily that we're all doing. But it was a lot of fun. We really appreciate Randy's time. And he has a newsletter too, MuellerFootball.com. I would encourage you guys to check it out if you're looking for his perspective on all things NFL. But we really appreciate Randy Mueller's time, and here is our interview. Thank you to Randy Mueller for joining us here. Randy was the NFL Executive of the Year in 2000, ample front office experience, and now writes an outstanding newsletter that you can find at MuellerFootball.com. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, good to be with you guys.
Really appreciate the time. All right, well, we're just going to start from the very top. What do you think of Trevor Lawrence? Is he generational? And what's the gap, if any, in your opinion, from Trevor Lawrence to the rest of this draft class, Randy?
Well, you used some big words there. I don't know about generational. I wish I had that much foresight, that's for sure. But I'll say this, Trevor Lawrence is a good player. I like him a lot. I think the Jaguars are very fortunate to have the first pick in the year that he's coming out. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has all the physical traits you're looking for. There's a couple things that he'll need to improve on, but for the most part, you may go 20 years and not find a guy that's 6'5", 230, can run like he can and make all the throws. So there is a lot to be excited about if I'm a Jaguar fan. As far as what separates him from the field, I think the biggest thing is I think the amount of upside there is with a guy like Trevor Lawrence is quite a bit more than the rest of the field. For me, Zach Wilson is the second guy, but I think because of Zach's size, physicality of the NFL, Trevor Lawrence is the guy who has the biggest upside. I think there are things he's going to have to work out, but I think there's a fair amount of difference between him and Zach Wilson and the rest of these guys, just based on the film that I've seen. And going forward, it's never a crystal ball, but I like his chances. I like Trevor Lawrence's chances of being successful in Jacksonville.
Hey, Randy, as a general manager, how difficult is it when you're sitting down there, a week or two before the draft day, and you're getting all these offers for this pick? And how difficult is it to believe in what you've seen, what your scouts have told you? You've gone over things and not say, okay, maybe we should trade this thing.
Well, it's definitely a process that has started a long time ago. So you've had plenty of time to get your ducks lined up. I always felt like being an evaluator by trade and having come up through the business like I did gave me a little bit of an advantage, because at the end of the day, although we built consensus by listening to everybody's opinion, I knew what I saw on film. So I could always fall back to the fact that I see it, I understand it, I get it. I don't have to depend on what anybody else has said for me to make this decision. I think that's the biggest thing that I always thought was an ace in the hole. I think you have to listen to every bit of information from other teams. I think you've also got to tune out a lot of information you may get in the media and the noise, so to speak. I even to this day tune out a lot of that stuff because there's different agendas at work. You have agents, you have media outlets, you have everybody working with a different agenda. So you need to filter in the information that not necessarily makes sense, but that the agenda isn't affecting what you hear.
Randy, you said something really interesting, that he'll have things that you can see that he'll need to improve upon. Can you elaborate on what you see or areas of concern with Trevor Lawrence as he enters the NFL?
Well, I don't have a ton of concern, but I do think you have to factor in the offense that he ran at Clemson, the amount that they put on him to process or not. And there are some things that he's going to have to get better. He's going to have to expand his mind. He's going to have to process more information. He will make some bad decisions at times at Clemson, and it's usually when pressure is on him, it forces him to speed up his decision making, and that just comes with he hasn't been under the gun a lot. Let's face it, Clemson's better than everybody they play for the most part, so he isn't pressured a lot. I got news for you: in the NFL, he's going to get pressured every Sunday, and his decision making will have to be sped up. But the good news is he has all the physical tools to do this. He's going to have to process the information post-snap, pre-snap, all through the whole process. And again, you'll never know some of that information until he's under the gun on Sundays against NFL competition.
Randy, with the league going more toward RPO stuff, principles of it, and Trevor comes into this situation where Urban has done a lot of that as a college coach. He's got his offensive coordinator and his quarterbacks coach have done a little bit of it in the NFL. Do you move more towards that on offensive? Let's give him more of what he knows, let him soak that up, and then we'll move from there?
I think you definitely can. I think that's an advantage that the Jaguars will use if they end up picking this kid. I think that gives him time to perfect some of the other second and third level pocket passing characteristics that he just hasn't been exposed to at Ohio State. I do think there's one thing, though, if they do develop and use the RPO-based system, the kid's going to have to protect his body a little bit, because those guys that are chasing you are bigger, faster, stronger, more powerful than he's being hit with on a weekly basis in college. So I see him taking some shots when you watch it on tape. He's going to have to do a better job to prepare to save his body week to week and live to fight another day, so to speak.
Randy, what did you make out of Trevor's pro day, and what was your opinion of how Urban Meyer elected to handle it in terms of where he was and how much of a presence he seemed to have at Trevor Lawrence's pro day?
Yeah, it didn't really matter to me. I didn't read anything into the pro day that I didn't already glean from watching tape. You kind of have an idea. Not kind of. You have a definite idea and picture of what a guy can do. It does help to see him throw live, but most of the scouts, most of the decision makers saw him throw live in game situations. They were at games, or at practice at Clemson prior to this year. As far as Urban Meyer's presence, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. Urban is feeling his way in a new job as well. I think he'll find that being out front all the time isn't always the place to be, but he did it in this case because I think he has to make an investment for the future, and it's the biggest decision up until now the franchise has to make. So he wanted to see certain things. He wanted to get certain things from the pro day, whether it was a route or a drop or something instructional that he had Trevor then regurgitate back to him on the next rep. There's reason for him to be involved, but it really doesn't really have a lot to do with my evaluation, that's for sure.
So, Randy, in all years in the NFL, what's the most difficult thing for a quarterback to adjust to, a young quarterback, when he finally gets on the field in the NFL?
I think for one, it's the speed of the game, and you hear that a lot, but it is a fact. And the other thing is the ball has to come out. These guys are used to hanging onto the ball and deciding late in the down where it's going to go. They don't have that option in the pros very often. The ball needs to come out. So we used to do drills with them where we hand them the ball just to see how quickly they could get it out of their hand, sometimes even without grabbing the thread. You want to see them possess it and get it out quickly. So that's the big thing, is the speed of the game and how quick you got to get back in your drop and get rid of the ball.
Randy, you did such an outstanding job as a general manager in this league. Can you talk about the advantage that the Jaguars have in terms of Trevor Lawrence and how small his cap number will be on this rookie contract compared to the elite starting quarterbacks in this league? And how does that help you then build the best roster around him?
Oh, it's an unbelievable advantage. There's no doubt about it. I think that the statistics bear it out. Nobody's won a Super Bowl with a quarterback making, more than 18% or 13% of the salary cap, so to speak. So yes, you have to have a quarterback, but you've got to have a team around him as well. The thing that this does is, if they pick this kid, in my opinion, they have a top 10 NFL talent already, and they have really 4 or 5 years to build around it. Not only that, in this year of COVID and the cap restrictions that teams are going to have, there's going to be more players, and we're already seeing it, more players available on the market right now for teams that have cap money than ever before. So if they're doing their homework, if they're doing things right in Jacksonville, they're going to be able to retool their whole team quickly, and that's a giant advantage as well. So they're going to get their quarterback, but they're going to get better in a lot of other areas too. I think them and the Jets both stand a chance to take their teams from last to first, so to speak, in a quick fashion, quicker than any time window we've had to rebuild or retool in the league.
It's almost like the perfect storm for both those guys. Randy, to that end, if you're the GM here, what are you doing first for Trevor? Are you protecting him? Are you getting him more weapons on the outside? What are you doing?
Well, I'm doing two things. One, I am upgrading both on offense and defense up front. I think it's all about the teams that win in this league can control the pass rush and keep the quarterback upright, and they can press the line of scrimmage on defense. So that is not going to be different than what Urban Meyer did at Ohio State. They had more big cats than any place in the league. That's why these teams win. That's why Alabama wins. That's why all these, college programs that are perennially good, they're good because they have big guys. And the other thing is they have to add speed. So big guys and speed are the two things I'm looking to retool, and you can't get enough of those. And whether you use that on offense or defense doesn't really matter, but you've got to find a couple guys that can run, and you've got to have big people and build depth on both sides of the ball.
Randy, another potential advantage I wanted to ask you about for the Jaguars is, let's say they have decided that they're taking Trevor Lawrence at 1. Does it still make sense for them to invest a lot of man hours in coming up with a grade on Wilson, Lance, Fields, and Mac Jones, or do you take those manpower hours and devote them to other areas to kind of get more of a complete draft picture as you go into it?
Well, I think you've got to do your due diligence on those guys. What's to say that you don't get some crazy offer that allows you to drop back a spot or two, and you have to have sorted those other guys out and found how much of a gap there really is. I don't think there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks in the first round that are going to play in the NFL, but there might be 2 or 3. So I would definitely invest time and manpower in that. The other thing is, and I think they have to do this as their due diligence, is they got to kind of monitor what's going on in Houston too. That's the one place that if I'm Houston, if I'm willing to at some point move Deshaun Watson, the first call I make is probably to Jacksonville. So they've got to have thought through that scenario and talked that ad nauseum as well, and invested time, effort, and everything into evaluating Deshaun Watson and what that does for their options as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, that's what I was going to ask you about, to elaborate on that. What, in your opinion, would be a crazy offer that Urban Meyer would have to listen to?
Well, I think most in our league would pick Deshaun Watson over this kid right now. Whether that's the long-term net effect, I don't know. But I think Deshaun Watson signed for 5 or 6 years at contract numbers that aren't bad the first couple of years. I think advances their cause the next 2 or 3 years for sure in Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence might advance their cause for the next 10 more, but it definitely has to be discussed. I don't know what you're referring to, but who has to give more if a swap of those two spots or players are on the table? That's a good question.
Yeah, and it'll be fascinating to see what Houston elects to do. Okay, we really appreciate your time. Final question. Is there any benefit in telling Trevor and his camp, not publicly, but is there any benefit in the Jaguars telling Trevor that he is the pick? And if so, when do you think that could happen?
I don't think there's any benefit in that at all. In fact, I always like to use the process as part of the process. So I would continue to gather. I would continue to kind of stress this kid, put him under the gun as many ways as you can. It's harder now in the COVID era to have these face-to-face meetings, but I would try to gain as much of an advantage by picking his brain, by learning with him, not knowing the end result of it. I just think you can test them. You can come up with all kinds of scenarios where you can glean little bits of information differently if there's some doubt in that kid's mind where he's going to go.
Fantastic. Well, Randy, we certainly appreciate your help. This was awesome, and best of luck to you. And again, fans, find him on Twitter, Randy Mueller, former NFL Executive of the Year. Randy, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed it.
All right, take care, Randy. Thank you for your time.
You're listening to the 1010XL TrevorCast, brought to you by our friends at Claude Nolan Cadillac, beginning lasting relationships since 1905.
Really appreciate Randy Mueller's time, and once again appreciate our good friends at Claude Nolan Cadillac sponsoring the TrevorCast again. If you're looking for a vehicle, head over there. They'll treat you right. Great people at Claude Nolan Cadillac, and thank you so much for sponsoring the TrevorCast. Well, I'm fired up. I mean, Randy, again, we talked about tone. He doesn't want to, you can tell that he wants to kind of keep it in the lane. You know how I am, Matt. I've been anything but in the lane with Trevor. I'm driving all over the road. I'm so excited that he's here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be great. But you hear him say things like, the Jaguars are fortunate to have the first pick because you could go 20 years without seeing a quarterback with this size, arm, and speed. And you hear him say that, he believes there's a chance Trevor Lawrence is a top 10 NFL talent already at the position.
Right, which is it's just phenomenal to even think about that. It's interesting. For my job, Hayes, a lot of times I will talk to NFL scouts, and they'll tell me things off the record, and I'll use that in stories I'm writing. And for the most part, they're either just effusive in their praise, or they hold back a little bit. But you can see when they praise a guy, they're like, yeah, I can see them going into their meeting, with the front office people, with the pro personnel guy, with the general manager. This guy's X, Y, and Z. And you can't to have the due diligence. You can't just jump all in on that. You can't go in the deep end. And I think that's where Randy is right now. He doesn't want to go in the deep end. He sees it's very safe in the deep end right now. He sees it looks good. The water's cool. Everything's great. But he's not jumping in yet. And I think that's where he is right now. And that's every time I talk to a scout, they always say, yeah, well, this is what I think to it. Once we get to the table, it changes dramatically.
Yeah, no question about it. And I thought he was good on the other things, like the Urban Pro Day. I thought I put a lot of weight into that. Randy Mueller really didn't. He was like, well, it doesn't affect me. Which I thought was interesting. So again, hearing that more measured front office perspective, was good, not just on Trevor's talent, but on a variety of issues, and again, doing the due diligence on every other quarterback, because you don't know. I did think it was interesting when we talked about what would be the crazy offer that you would consider? And he kind of immediately went to Deshaun Watson, which there's no chance that happens.
Right.
You're not going to see Deshaun Watson trade within the division, and you're not going to see, more importantly, the Jaguars trade the rights to Urban Meyer to a team they have to play twice a year. So that's not going to happen. So I thought it was interesting that he couldn't get to a point outside of Deshaun Watson that he could consider the crazy deal, which, again, I think just speaks to the fact that, it's
this is a generational player.
Yeah, it would take something remarkable to get the Jaguars to move out of that spot. And, I don't see that happening. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Really appreciate Randy Mueller. Next week, I'm really excited. Mac Brown, tell us a little bit about that.
Mac Brown, the coach at North Carolina, former coach at Texas, won a national title with Texas, coached some elite quarterbacks, including Vince Young and Chris Sims. And he kind of explains to us the it factor. We hear about it all the time. What is it? What's the it factor? He kind of breaks it down and explains what it is, how you get it, how it gets there, and how it can basically get into your team and everybody follows.
Great stuff. That's Matt Hayes. I'm Hayes Carline. Thanks to Graham Marsh for making it all happen. This has been the TrevorCast. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to listen to it. And once again, we appreciate our good friends at Claude Nolan Cadillac for sponsoring it. Claude Nolan Cadillac, if you're looking for a vehicle, head over and see them. Great people, and they'll take great care of you. This has been TrevorCast on 1010XL.com. We will talk to you next week.